everybody, hope you guys are doing great today. So this week we are going to finish up with our learning formal language, but we're going to be using this formal language for essentially the rest of the semester. So what we really want to do right now is just hone some of the things we've already been working on a little bit. Last time what we did was we talked a lot about how we construct certain sentences and what it means to legitimately construct statements versus you know illegitimate statements, things that we don't even want to call statements. They don't make sense. And that's a lot of what we talked about last time. And then we spent some time just doing some translations, right? Where we were translating some of these more complicated statements, right? Which involved more than one operator. And like I've mentioned, we can continue to construct more and more and more complicated statements. This time I want to focus on doing not the construction aspect of it, but just how we analyze and how we understand these statements. So all of this is going to be facilitated by the more you understood just this talk about construction is going to help us look at this. But really what I want to focus in on is this idea of main operator / connective and the scope of an operator. So the idea, again, this is straight from your lecture notes, is that any time you use something like rule 2 or 3, right? Like any time. So even like that, let me take a step back. Anytime we have a connective, right, like a negation or right, a conditional, disjunction, biconditional, or conjunction, right, we create a complicated proposition, right, a more complicated proposition, right, like here when right we used rule 3 to put together this guy and that guy, and the idea is that every time we do that, we're adding in a new connective, and we can consider what is the scope of that connective. So let's look here. What we mean by scope is the portion of the sentence that an operator is applying to, right, or concerned with, if you will, right? So let me explain a bit more of what I mean. Notice here, this and. Let's think, what is it that this and is really combining, right? What is it that the and sees, so to speak? And the idea is that the and is it's combining R and it's combining C, right? Like if we were to think back to how this thing was constructed, you started off with R, you had C, and then you put them together with this. That's why this thing made sense. And then we put a negation on it. And then we said, okay, if this whole left side, then this right side, right? So the point is, if we asked for this first statement itself, let me maybe add some spaces. We won't do this for every one of them. But the scope of the conjunction is R and C. To not confuse it, I'll do R comma C. R on the left, C on the right. Right? That's what that and essentially sees, right? That's what this statement is. It's this little sub-statement in here is just the statement R is true and C is true together, right? So the scope of this and is just its own left side and just its own right side. Now, let's compare that to so I'll make both of these a little bit smaller. Let's compare that to the negation. Right? The scope of the negation is just, well, let's think about what it's applying to. It's not just applying to the R, right? Because we have these parentheses. These parentheses are wrapping this whole thing together. So the idea is, right, the negation is applying to not just the R, but it's applying to this whole thing wrapped together. It's not applying to the entire sentence, because it's not as if, right, we had the entire sentence wrapped together. Then the negation would have everything in its scope. But right here, as we have it written originally, oh, that's weird. Right, it's just applying to that left side, right? So we can say the scope of that is just the R and C. right? And then finally, we can ask, okay, so then like what is the scope of the last connective we have here? Right? And the scope of the last connective is, well, it's not just the R and C, because it's taking that entire left side, right? It's saying if it's not the case that both R and C, then W would happen. So the idea is, right, it is this whole thing on the left and W on the right. Right, so when we say something like the scope of an operator, we're trying to ask, like, what is it that the operator is looking at, right? Like, in a sense, you can think about it like this conjunction has no idea what's going on the outside over here, right? Like, all that it sees is just what like it's using to build this sentence, right? It sees the R and the C, and then the negation sees this R and C, like this complicated statement. And then the conditional sees the entire left side and the entire right side. And it's that last connective, the one that whose scope is the entire rest of the sentence, that's what we call the main connective, right? Like, so we don't call the conjunction main because like it's only looking at part of the statement. We don't call the negation main because it's only looking at part of the statement. We call the conditional the main one because it's looking at the whole thing. And the reason why we do that is, like, just like I have in this green note here, it's a little, might be a little blurry. We categorize / refer to the sentences by the main operator. So, like, a sentence with a conditional, we're going to think about it as a conditional statement. Like, this thing right here, so I can write this. Conditional statement. And that just means main operator is an arrow. That's all I mean by that. Meanwhile, like, let's look down here. This is what we would call a conjunction, right? Like, the main operator here for this statement, I mean, maybe pause and see if you can identify it. But the main operator, right, it's not or. Or only sees the R and it sees the C. The conditional only sees the L and it sees the D. It's the conjunction that's taping everything else together. Right? On the left side, it sees the R or C. On the right side, it sees the L, then D. Right? So we call this statement is a conjunction. Right? Main operator is an and. Right? So, like, the statement itself, a lot of things are going on, but, like, at core, right, what it is it's a conjunction. It's telling me two things are true. On the one hand, R or C is true, and on the other hand, if L then D is true, right? Like, those two complex statements it's telling me are true, right? Okay, so then this next one, right, the main operator, well, it's not this left conditional, because the left conditional only sees the R and the W. The right conditional only sees the C and the D. It's the biconditional that sees the entire left side and the entire right side. So the main operator, you'll start to notice, right, is the one not wrapped up inside of any parentheses, or right. The more wrapped up an operator is, the more like secondary it is, right? The more inferior it is. That might not be the right word, right? And so down here, right, the negation, it sees the R, the conjunction sees the L and sees the D, but it's the or that sees the whole left side, the not R, and then the L and D on the other. Now, of course, with all of these, adding parentheses crucially changes it, right? Because now, when I just added parentheses, and now the main operator is the negation. Because now, look, I just wrapped everything up together, and I said, okay, we're going to start with this statement, and we're going to say that entire thing is not true, right? So, again, it matters which operator is the furthest outside all of the parentheses. Okay, so in this case, right, like you can be thinking about this as just, right, not R wrapped up in there. It's the or that sees the whole left side and the whole right side. The negation doesn't. Right, so we can call this one is called a biconditional. This one is called a disjunction. So I can go ahead and write these a biconditional statement. Main operator is a biconditional. And then a disjunctive statement. Main operator is an or. And then, of course, this one down here, this is another conditional statement, right? Because this is just, it's just the main operator, right? The conjunction only sees the R and the C. The other conjunction only sees the W and the L. So the only operator to see them all is just this conditional. So this would make this last statement just a big conditional statement. You're saying, if this happens, then this other stuff will happen. Now, again, just to show you the fifth possibility, fifth type of statement, I could wrap the entire thing together. Right? This is still a completely well-formed formula. What I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, that initial conditional you thought was true, I'm rejecting it. Right? I'm saying it's not the case that if R and C are true, then W and L will follow. Right? So this is what we would call a negation. Right? We're saying something is not true. So the way the main operator of the statement, like it might seem like just trivial, like, oh yeah, you're just picking one of the, like your favorite operator out of them or something like that, and it's not trivial. It's certainly not just picking your favorite, right? The idea is that the main operator really like gives you the what type of sentence it is, how we're going to deal with it, right? Again, like I mentioned before, depending on what the main operator is, that's going to change what standards it has for being true versus false, right? Like for me to prove A and B, that's very different from me proving A or B, right? So it's really going to matter for what we do as we go forward to be able to identify, okay, this is a disjunction, this is a conditional, this is a conjunction, or excuse me, I was wrong. This is a negation, right? Because it's the negation that sees everything. The arrow here is wrapped up inside, and so the arrow doesn't see the negation, right? So we get to like identifying this is a negation, this is a disjunction, this is a biconditional, this is a conjunction, and this is a conditional. Being able to see that, even though they all have all these different symbols, it's going to be really important for how we go forward. So next unit, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be thinking about, all right, so if I have this conditional statement and this negation statement, what else can I prove? And so it's really going to matter that we're able to categorize these properly based on those main operators. Okay, so I didn't do a lot of translating there, and I don't want to spend as long as we may have spent last time, hopefully, translating each of these, but it's still good to do it. And all I'm going to do is I'll move this over here. I'm going to do essentially the same thing I did last time, but hopefully with a little bit more speed. So let's go ahead and give myself that space that I needed. Okay. So again, and the reason why I'm doing this is because this is just a classic thing for people to struggle with. So I just want to make sure we're all feeling at least relatively good. And of course, if you're not by the end of this and by the end of your quiz and reading the lecture notes, definitely reach out. All right, so just like before, I'm always going to start with my main operator, okay? So the idea is, let's just go ahead and do this. So I see my main operator here as a conditional. So I'm going to say if, then. That's all that I'm going to do, right? And now all I'm going to think is, all right, so this part, right, is my left side. And then this part is my right side, right? And so now all I need to do is I can just... now I can think, all right, so before I go take care of my letters or anything like that, let's just translate, let's further break this down. So the main operator of this little substatement is what? Is it a negation or is it a conjunction, right? And again, I'm setting aside the if then, right? I'm like zooming in and I'm thinking like, okay, just looking at this not R and C. And the idea is the main operator is the negation. So that's where I'm going to start. So like as we're doing these translations, one of the reasons why the main operator is so important is, well, at every level we'll realize like we're uncovering, like we're taking off the top layer of this statement, and then the next layer has its own like main operator, right? The sub operator for that. So like here, right, I know, oh, the main thing here is just it is the negation. So I can say, oh, well, really what we want to just do is say if it is not the case that R and C, then W. And then I can say, all right, again, I'm going to leave my letters. I'm going to just keep further breaking this down. If it's not the case that R and C, then W. And then finally, and I'll try very hard not to do this for every single one, but of course, if you're someone that wishes that I would, like definitely, of course, please reach out for any help. And then now I'm just going to, if it is the case that it is raining and cold, then the ground is wet. How should I do this? Yeah, I'll set that right there. I'll set this right here. Okay. So right, so like again, I'm always just going to start with that main operator, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just try to break it down. Okay, so let me maybe cut some time. Okay, let's look at all these just together. So right, for the first one, we say okay, we have this main operator is a conjunction. So that's what we swap out first. We just say, all right, let me put the left side on the left of the conjunction, the right side on the right of the conjunction. And then I'll dig into each side on their own, right? Kind of like ignoring the rest of the sentence as I do it, right? So I just look at this R or C, I forget about the whole rest of it, and I say, oh, that or is just an or. And I do the same thing over here, right? I look at that L arrow D, I forget about what else is going on, and I just think, oh, that's just saying if L, then D. And then, right, I just dig a little deeper. Now I've taken care of all of my symbols, and I just have to replace each of my letters. If it's cold or raining, or if it's raining or cold, and if, excuse me, all right, this is a conjunction, so we're saying two things, and, right? It's raining or cold, and if the light is on, then the door is open, right? The two things being the one disjunction on the left side, and the one conditional on the right side. Okay. So let's keep going. So in this next one, we have a biconditional statement, right? It's the biconditional is the main operator of everything. So we say, well, the left side, if and only if the right side. And then we're just going to dig into each one of those on their own. Well, the left side just says if R, then W. The right side just says if C, then D. So we're just going to say, okay, so if raining entails that the ground is wet, right. All right, excuse me. So again, these long, complicated sentences, this is why it's important that we move into our nice, concise language over here. But the idea is we're saying it's an if and only if, right? Let me maybe bold that, right? It is raining entails the ground is wet, or maybe even, again, just English is hard. Rain entails the ground is wet, if and only if being cold entails the door is open. Right? So it's like saying this rule is true if and only if this rule is also true. Again, it like especially when we read these in English, like it becomes more and more and more complicated and like ugly to try to like parse out. Like if I just showed you this statement, I mean, you would be forgiven to think like, wait, could you slow down? I'm not sure what that means. But ideally, pretty soon here, you should be able to look at the logic form of that statement and understand it pretty quickly. Like, yeah, okay, you're giving me this biconditional where the left side is one conditional and the right side is the other. So you're telling me that these conditionals are somehow equivalent. And we'll get into how that works a little later. But like the idea is that this way of writing it is supposed to capture these really complicated statements in a much more concise way that just makes those relationships really clear. Okay, so next one, right, we have this disjunctive statement, right? It's saying either this or that. And so that's all we do. We say, okay, either not left, or right, either the left side, which is not R, or the right side, which is L and D. So we translate that left side, right? It's not the case that R, or L and D, right? Just like what we had above. We're just taking care of these symbols. And that's how we get, it's not raining, right? Not R, or, and then the L and D. The light is on and the door is open. Okay. And then finally, we have our negation statement. So again, look closely at this statement. The main operator is not a conditional. This conditional does see this R and C. It sees the W and L, but the conditional is wrapped inside these parentheses, so it doesn't see this negation, right? This is different than if we had it like this. Now, if it was like this, the conditional is the main thing, right? Because now the negation just applies to the left side. It doesn't apply to the right side at all. But when we have those extra parentheses that wrap up the whole middle part, now it's saying, no, you started with this conditional statement, right, when we were constructing it, so to speak, and we rejected it. So what we're saying is, it's not the case that this whole conditional statement is true, right? And so then we're just going to keep breaking it down. It's not the case that if R and C, then W and L. Which is the same thing as saying, it's not the case that if R and C, then W and L, right? It's not the case that if it's raining and cold, then the ground is wet and the light is on, right? Again, like these statements, they continue to get longer and more complicated. And of course, like these are real, whether it's daily life, like our statements get this complicated, but also definitely in terms of, right, more complicated things like math or science or morality or religion, like things get complicated. And so it's really important that we're able to not get too bogged down with just like tons of just natural language and the ambiguity that comes along with it. And we can just get really focused on what is the true structure we're thinking about. Okay, so now let's look at some English to logic sentences. So again, the idea is we're just going to try to find our main operators. So let's do this together this time. So we're going to start off. What is the main operator of this first statement? So it's a good idea probably throughout this to be pausing and be thinking to yourself before we answer these questions. But so what do you think in this first case, right? We have, I've bolded the operators to make it a little easier. So we have an if then, right? If then, that's part of one. A not, an and. But what type of sentence is this? Is it a big sentence that's saying two things are true, this and that? Is it a big negation? Is it just saying, hey, this is false? Or is it a conditional? Is it telling us if something were true, then this other thing would follow? Right? It's really that last one. We're saying if all of that stuff, so I'll just write this as the conditional, then the right side, right? Like that's what we have going on here. We have a conditional where the left side, let's go ahead and do all of this, but in reverse. The left side, right, is just, it's not raining and cold, right? Like that's what the left side is. And then the conditional, so we can, actually, yeah, I skipped my parentheses in the first place. But right, like we can always just wrap up the left and the right side, if not in underlines, just in the parentheses, right? So we're trying to say with this statement, on the left side, if it's not raining and cold, then the ground is wet. So right then, so we're going to just take this and we're going to put it right over here. The ground is wet. And now all we need to do is just, right, like just same old, right? We just need to keep working down inside. So it is not raining and cold. So again, here we have a little bit of ambiguity in terms of English. It seems to me that the idea is we're saying, well, it is not the case that it is both raining and it's cold, right? So like we're taking raining and cold and we're tying them together with this and then we're attaching this negation on the outside. So to make that more clear, right? We're saying something like it's not the case that it's raining and cold. Right? So we have if the left side still, where the left side is, it's not the case that it's raining and it's cold, then the right side. And then we can, of course, we take care of our and. And then finally, right, we substitute those things. Right? So notice like that's the same sentence here. So it'll, as we go, this is the sort of thing that you want to try to get more and more comfortable with. The idea that like, okay, if I just see, if I see this main operator as a conditional, I'm saying if this left side, where this left side is just a negation, right? I'm saying if it's not the case that both are in C, then W will happen, or W is true. Okay. So we're going to try to do that same thing with the rest of these. So let me probably need more space for each one of these. Right, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, it is raining or cold, and if the lights are on, then the door is open. So again, we have this or, we have this and, we have this if, we have this then, right? If then. And let's think, like, is it that we're saying either it's raining or it's cold, and if the lights are on, then the door is open? That's one choice, right? The or could be our main operator. Or we might think the if-then is the main operator. But notice, like, that's already kind of a non-starter, because it's saying if the light is on, then the door is open. Like, it's clearly not even talking about rain or cold or anything. So that it really leaves us with the and, right? We're saying two things are true. One, this disjunction is true, right? It's either cold or it's raining. And this rule is true, this conditional. If the light is on, then the door is open. So, right, like the idea then is we have this big conjunctive statement. We have this big statement that says two things are true. The right side and the left side. Right, that's what a conjunction is telling us. And so we can just go through the steps, right? Okay, now let me just translate that left side. So all I'm going to do is say it is raining or, so or is just a wedge. And then on the right side, if the light is on, then the door is open. Oh, that's just a good old-fashioned conditional. And now I've taken care of all my symbols. So now I can go ahead and just replace with the letters. Right? So again, like hopefully you're starting to get that second nature for reading these statements, right? It's saying two things are true, right? It's a conjunction. On one hand, I'm telling you that, hey, either R or C will happen, and on the other hand, I'm telling you that if L happens, D will happen. But I'm telling you both things. I'm conjoining these things. Okay. So now let's think about this. I'm just going to go ahead and do that so that way this stops being so annoying. Okay, so we have this next sentence here. And again, we have this if and only if, and then another just in case. So just in case, we haven't talked about too much, or maybe not at all yet. Just in case is actually another way of saying if and only if, right? So like if I said I'm going to the party just in case, right, Bill is, what I'm saying is if Bill goes to the party, I'll go to the party. But if Bill doesn't go to the party, I'm not going to the party, right? So like if you see Bill there, what do you know about me? Well, you know I'm going to be there. If you see me there, you know the only way that happened was because Bill was there, right? So like it's another way of just saying one of them is going to cause the other. So we really have two biconditionals in this statement. Now we need to think about, all right, well then which one is the main one? And let's think about this. And here again, our comma does us some heavy lifting, right? We're saying it's raining if and only if the ground is wet, but that whole thing is true just in case cold weather means the door is open. Ooh, and actually this means here is another hidden connective that didn't get bolded. Oops, sorry about that. Because right here we're saying it being cold entails the door is open. So in this case, right, we need to identify, like, we have this main operator, this just in case, right? Because we're saying this rule happens, it is raining if and only if the ground is wet, is true just in case this rule is true, that cold weather means the door is open, right? So now we have our left and our right side. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to dig deeper, just like we always do. We're just going to now work out what's going on inside. So if and only if, that's a clear biconditional again. And then means, right, that's not a biconditional, right? We're saying cold weather means the door is open, but that doesn't mean the door is open means that we have cold weather, right? So it's just a single direction, right? Cold weather leads to the door being open. So, right, we just have this big old sentence of lots of biconditionals and conditionals. So now, but we've taken care of all of our symbols, so now all that's left is just the operator, or the variables themselves. Right? So again, this is the sort of sentence that, like, as we go, hopefully this will start to make more and more sense to you written as this set of symbols, right? Because it's making really clear what it's saying leads to what, and what it's saying relates to what. Whereas in English, right, like, that's going to get more and more and more sloppy and more difficult to tell what's actually going on. For instance, like, it's going to be difficult to say, oh, we're dealing with that sentence and not something like, I don't know, right? Like that, telling these two apart, I think I've got this right. Yeah, there we go. Is like really difficult if we were to write them out in both of these in English, this sentence and that sentence. But in logic, right, like it'll continue to be more and more clear to you. But in logic, the symbols are purporting to make it very clear, right? Like the symbols make it clear, like this is your main operator. Whereas down here, it's this first biconditional is your main operator. So, right, like, it'll become easier and easier not to use English and just to use this logical language. Okay, making okay time. Let's try to finish up these last couple examples. So, it's not raining or the light is on and the door is open. So this is a case where, right, our language, our exercise doesn't give us a lot to go on in terms of those commas, right? So, like, again, this is exactly what we're trying to avoid. I will try to avoid ever giving you exercises that are so clearly ambiguous like this one, but let's see what we can do here. We have, it's not raining or the light is on and the door is open. So oftentimes, so again, this is just like, this is not like, this sort of like super English parsing is not going to be what I'm like really going to be quizzing you on. There's some important things with like translating that we'll be talking about actually next time too. But like my point here is just that, like, as I try to work through this, like, again, this is me working through some intuitions and stuff, and generally speaking, I'm going to give you exercises that don't require you to do the same exact thing. But in this case, generally speaking, if not was going to be referring to raining and lights, we usually, like, if it was trying to negate this entire or statement, then we'd really be using something like, it is neither raining nor the light on, right? So that makes me think that really, like, this not is inside. It just applies to the raining part and not to the or part. Now how about this and? So it's not raining or the light is on and the door is open. So something about this, the way I'm reading it, is that, yeah, the and is putting these two things together. So let me, again, this one is like especially ambiguous, so I just want to reiterate. I don't get overwhelmed by this one and like that you don't. It's not clear how you would do it. But the way I'm reading this is that we have an or, and on the right side we're saying it's either not raining or the light is on and the door is open. Right? And then, of course, once I identify which of those operators is the main one, now we're off to the races, right? Now I can just say, okay, take this not and put it right here. It is not raining, or the light is on and the door is open. Right? And then I can just replace with my variables. Raining, the light is on, the door is open. Okay. So again, like this one again, English is ambiguous. So like if we did read it differently and we thought like and was the main operator or something, then we would have a really different statement here, right? We would be grouping the not R and the L, the not R or L together, and then the and D on the outside. But again, this is all just to get back to the fact that this is why we're going to use this rigorous language where we're very clear on which of these statements we mean. Because the language, like if I was just to give you this as a premise, you would be rightly confused. Like you would be thinking like, well, I'm not clear what you're really trying to tell me. I'm not clear what you're really trying to argue for or about or whatever. So that's the whole point of this, moving to this language and away from the difficulties of natural language. Okay, one last exercise. If it is raining and cold, then the ground is wet and the light is on. So, right, this one does give us that nice comma that makes this makes it more clear what our main operator is, right? It also starts with this if. That's another big sign. So we have if it is raining and cold, right? Then the ground is wet and the light is on, right? That's the main operator. And then we want to go to a next step, right? It's raining and cold. Okay, well, we know there's only one operator going on the left. It's just an and. It is raining and it is cold. To be extra careful. I haven't been that careful every time. Apologies. And then the ground is wet and the light is on. So again. And then, of course, so now we get to just replace with our variables. Right. And so now, like again, I just keep reiterating it. But now hopefully when you see something like this like R and C arrow W and L, like hopefully you're starting to get a little bit more of that intuition. Like, okay, this is telling me that this package together, R and C together, leads to, entails, or justifies, requires W and L, right? And that's the sort of thing that, like, yeah, we can pull out of like reading this sentence and whatnot and trying to understand it. But like the more we use this language, the more like it should be just like obvious just at first sight, like what the structure of this statement is saying and what it's trying to do. Okay, so that's it for just how like learning formal language itself, right? Just trying to understand like, okay, what are the basic building blocks? How do I put those building blocks together? And then, like, what does it really mean when I've put those building blocks together, right? And the idea is that every statement is always going to have a main operator, right? It's always going to have an operator that essentially sees the rest of the statement, that gives you the overall structure of the statement. And that's what you want to start with. You want to just start with thinking like, okay, this is a conditional, or this is a conjunction. And then you want to think, okay, so what's the left-hand side of my conditional? Or what's the right-hand side of my disjunction, right? Or what's the inside of the negation, right? And at each step, just like what we've done at each step along the way, right? We don't try to do everything at once, right? That really leads to confusion and a lot of problems very quickly, like as we get to more and more complicated things. We just try to say, okay, start with the main operator, and then what's the next like tier down of operators? And then what's the next? What's the next? What's the next? Until you get to the ground floor where you just have single little atomic statements that you want to replace. Okay, if any of this isn't making sense, definitely reach out, right? Like, you have obviously the videos and the lecture notes and that sort of thing and the quizzes themselves. But like, and as we go, all of this stuff, just like with the definition of logic and validity, these sorts of things, they're going to be much more important as we go, and we're going to be able to internalize these definitions as we go. But you should still feel at least somewhat confident at this point, at the end of these 3 weeks, about how to read these sorts of things. If I give you a statement at this point, now that we've finished up with the 3rd week on formal language, if I gave you a statement like this, right, and I told you what C and B mean, right, I gave you like a word bank like this, and it's not like second nature how to read this. If you're having, so let me put it like this way: if you're having to check your notes to see, is this an or an and, you definitely want to be spending some more time on this, right? Like, being able to read this as second nature should be pretty much, right? Yeah, just easy in second nature at this point. Something like this, right? Maybe you're still getting used to it, but even that's the sort of thing, like, yeah, just saying R or C, and if L then D, right? So like, we want to try to be getting to the point where we're pretty comfortable with these sorts of statements. Definitely we should be at the point where we're feeling comfortable with these sorts of statements, these just super basic ones. And if you're not, if you're still wondering whether or not this is an or a if then like, yeah, that means you should be spending a lot more time on the videos and lecture notes. And of course, if that's not getting you where you need to be, reach out and we will work on it together. Okay, I say all of this because now we are finally going to be putting together all of this formal language with the validity and soundness. Next week, the next unit we're going to be looking at is going to be putting together essentially everything we've done, so that way we can actually use this formal language to investigate when do we have valid versus invalid arguments. And if it's still like really confusing and you're still super lost on validity, or you're still super lost on the language, then the next unit's going to be pretty tough. So definitely reach out, make sure you're working hard at this point. Don't fall behind, and if you are feeling like you're falling behind, definitely let me know so we can get you on the right track. Okay, everyone, let me know if you have any questions. Take care and stay safe out there.